All right.
Oh, can I introduce you first?
Yes.
Okay. Most everybody knows me. I'm John. Yeah, everybody knows me. Everybody knows me. This is my good friend Andy. I've known him for 15 years, almost half of his life that I've known him. I got to know him back when I was working at Spring Lake Park High School in a program called Life 2000. That's when I was teaching some career research type skills, and Andy will go into that a little bit in his presentation. So if you haven't closed your your Chromebooks yet, would you do that too? Okay, that's good. And then we'll let Andy begin. We got about 4 slides to go through.
All right. Good afternoon, or morning, or whatever time it is. My name is Andy Dreisaver. I am 31 years old and on the spectrum. I was diagnosed with Asperger's in middle school. Actually, I think it was more or less high school. But the first thing I'll be talking about is a little bit about me. I was born in Chile, Santiago, Chile, in Talcahuano, which is kind of the Fridley of Santiago, which is a capital city. Premature. I was 4 months premature. So I almost didn't make it, but I told the Reaper where to put it. In any case, I was adopted by my parents, Gerald and Donna Dreisaver, and I was flown up to Minnesota, Coon Rapids to be precise, so a bit of a ways away from here, and I was diagnosed with autism, just autism, at the age of 3.5 by a professional, and I was moved for half a year to Willow Street. I forgot to mention that the first 5 times I did this, to Willow Street, where they did more assessments and diagnostics. And then I was sent up to Duluth, Minnesota at the age of 6, where I went to elementary school and middle school for my education. And that's when about the diagnosis changed from autism to Asperger's. I moved back down to Minneapolis, the Fridley area to be exact, at the age of 15. I'd gotten the word a year earlier and I was kind of stunned. But when I moved back down here, I entered into high school, where I did 4 years of regular high school and 3 extracurricular years of life skills, or transition programming as they call it now. So I was in high school for a total of 7 years, but that's where I also landed my first practical job, where I worked as a janitor for the AJC training services in Blaine. So there was some good that came out of it. Next slide. The next thing I'm going to talk about is employment. And for those of us who are on the spectrum, there are aspects of employment that can be difficult, and there are barriers to employment due to the culture and the society that we live in. So I'll go over a few of those. One of them is the interview process. It is a very daunting process, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to sell yourself to the individual that's trying to hire you. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
That your resume is your dossier. And in Latin, it's called a curriculum vitae, which means a life path, which is what we should be calling it, because that's what it is. And so one of the practice things that I did when I did my first interview that was not tied to any vocational program is I did my interviewing in front of a mirror several times, kind of rehearsing it like it was acting, and that really helped with the nerves. So that's one idea to deal with that barrier. Some of the other barriers are some workplaces can be very loud and play havoc on your sensory processing disorder or whatever you may have that accompanies the autism. There can also be social barriers, because we don't always look people in the eye. In fact, I'm looking all of you in the forehead or the nose when I present. How many of you were taught when you were younger to look people in the eye? Yeah, that was a common thing when I was growing up. And it was very overwhelming. Did any of you find it daunting or overwhelming to look in somebody else's eye, straight in the eye like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get a consensus of that when I'm online doing my advocacy work. The interview, basically what you're doing again is you're selling yourself. You're telling an employer why they want to hire you over hundreds of candidates. Some employers get hundreds of thousands of candidates every day, and you want to stick out. And that's what you're doing. And on the job, you'll run into various problems and difficulties throughout the day, whether it be with you, or with a coworker, or with a rule at work, or a boss. We all understand that, don't we? And there are ways to handle it. One of the things that I do to deal with things like that is I write things down. And I also come up with a solution to my problem when I'm on the way home, if it's a work situation, or I go and think about it by myself in my bedroom if I'm at home and it's a problem with the home. But in the workplace, ask for some time alone, I'll go into that later, and write things down. Always bring a notebook with you. And that gets into safe areas. As I discussed before, some work environments can be very overbearing on the senses and the sensory issues. Therefore, a tactic that I use that I learned in high school, interestingly enough, so I was around you guys' age, is I learned to just ask my boss or my teacher if I could take a quick 5-minute walk or a 5-minute break somewhere else that was quieter, just to regain my composure. I can credit Mr. Z with some of that, but the art teacher was the one who taught me that.
Right.
Next slide. Next slide is advocacy. And I am a self-advocate as well as an advocate for autism rights. I work with the Autism Highway Friendship Network and Naturally Autistic Canada. I almost said that in reverse for some reason, because it's written on ANCA, but it's Naturally Autistic Canada, so figure the logic out for that one. And we deal with government issues relating to autism rights and various further disability rights. And I used to be on their radio show for ANCA every Friday, but they discontinued that show. And then I did some work with Autism Highway. One of the big things I did with Autism Highway was I went down to California just last spring, and I participated in the Autism Highway Chalk Festival. And I'll get into more of that in the arts section, but what I did was I went and did a picture in chalk, and I networked with a lot of different advocates, a lot of different people on the spectrum, such as yourselves, and teaching professionals like Mr. Z or Sheila. And it was a fun little bash. So the first thing in advocacy I want to discuss is there's a topic that I like called etymology, and that means the dissecting of words to find out how they work and where they come from. The word advocate is made up of the two words ad vocatio, which means to speak in the stead of somebody else, to call out. It's literally to call out for somebody else. So there's a lot of baggage behind that word, and that's what I believe that I'm doing. And knowing the literal meaning of words, at least for me, has brought me some intelligence into what I'm actually saying. The second idea is to know who you are and know yourself, as I have it written down there. Knowing yourself and going outward, radiating outward is how you do it, in my opinion. Because if you don't know yourself, you can't really speak for yourself because you don't really have a grasp on your wants and your needs. And that's the big deal with doing advocacy work. How to advocate, I would advise, again, doing a lot of writing things down, interacting with other people on the internet or offline, or talking to friends about various issues going around in the community. As far as what you think needs to be fixed. And there's organizations on and offline, like AUSM is both on and offline, Autism Society of Minnesota. How many of you know that? Have you heard of AUSM? Oh, you haven't yet. I would recommend getting connected with them. They might be able to help you out. And then, of course, there's Naturally Autistic Canada and the Autism Highway Friendship Network that I've gone on about. And it's places like that where you can meet new people, get involved in social groups, get training on how to be an advocate. I mean, there's a professional thingamajig somewhere, I know. Next slide. Skill sets, special interests, or as I like to call them, ASPE superpowers. They're things that we on the spectrum tend to focus on intently. We're very into them, and we drive our friends and our parents crazy with talking about them. I'm sure many of you can relate to that. people on the spectrum can have unique skill sets from these interests. Whereas again, like I like to call them ASCII superpowers, and I got that from a close friend of mine. Skill sets can be used to supplement income. And as an example, I am an artist, and I also do light computer repair tech work. Those are two of the things that are my special interests. Mr. Z can attest for the computer repair work and the art. And the art thing actually came out of when we used to go to NEMA, the NEMA First Thursdays. And I got involved in it, and I said, well, how do I do it? And he kind of helped me out with that. And of course, the computer repair work just kind of happened, given the nature of my day job, which is the other thing, supplementing the income, so you can be an artist and do your day job as well. And it's kind of a balance. It brings balance to life. Skill sets can also be used as ways to cope with life. Life being life, stackers, stressors. And going back and focusing on something that you're into in a stressful moment can really help with the outcome of either managing, is a word that I don't really like to use, or controlling a meltdown. How many of you know what a meltdown is? I was actually going to get into that, but I didn't want to make this presentation the length of an entire day. And that's one of the things you can use to avert a meltdown. I mean, they're not always going to be preventable, but you know. Next slide. And since I'm an artist, and that's a big part of my life, I'm going to discuss the arts. Art is a communication medium. That slideshow is a form of communication. Your shirts that you have on have forms of communication on them. The TV is a form of communication. Movies are a form of communication. And they're all art. They're all works of art in their core. And I didn't have language, as I mentioned earlier, for about 2.5 years of my life after I was diagnosed at 3.5. And I didn't start speaking in full sentences till about 4 or 5, maybe 6. So I use the arts as a means of communication, which, to the next point, helped me evolve into who I am today. With Caddy Dragons, my art setup thing, or operation as I like to call it, and just having, again, a skill. And it has helped me with networking. Networking and communication. It's not what you know, it's who you know. So getting to know other artists, getting comfortable talking at vendors fairs with people, which I was a natural at because I have a background in sales, but you all, I don't think, have backgrounds in sales, or may not like dealing with people. Come on, I saw a smile. So that's one of the big ways the arts can help with that, which is why there are art therapy curriculums in a lot of special education departments, or were for a while, or in group homes. I had one at the group home I grew up at. Social skills, which, as I have said in previous presentations, which I think is a dirty word, smirk, grimace, can actually be acquired or honed through the use of the arts. Using something you're interested in to branch out and communicate, I think you'll all agree, is a lot more comfortable than just sitting and communicating with somebody face-to-face about random small talk topics. I'm sure I'll get a consensus on that one. Yes. So this is the end of the presentation. Do any of you have any questions for me?
Andy, we've got a lot of seniors in this classroom who are looking at going into college next year. Talk to people, our students, about what it was like for you when you were making applications for college and what it was like in college.
I didn't really do the application thing. Mr. Ambrasis did that for me, but college seemed to be a different ballgame, as the expression goes, to high school. Because I only took one class, I would advise taking one class at a time, because college is very, very, very overwhelming very quickly. I was able to focus better, and I got a lot of assignments done a lot quicker than most individual, quote-unquote, let's do our air quotes, typical students, because I was able to focus on one thing. Again, use a lot of those stress management techniques that I use on a daily basis. Don't worry, I'm no hypocrite. I have to go and take a breather every once in a while. But yeah, I would say just take it one small step at a time. It may take you longer to get there, but keep on going at your own pace.
One other thing you did mention the arts was your trip to California.
Yeah, I was going to expand on that, yes. I did a chalk drawing, and it took me about 3 hours, let's say, to round up. And it was Tiamat around the world, which is a symbolic thing from ancient Sumeria. But I also met Kelly Green, the founder of Autism Highway Friendship Network. I stayed at her place for 5 days of prep work, fun, you know, partying, and not that kind of partying. And the Chalk Festival, and it was a big deal. There was tents set up everywhere, there was vendors. I met a lot of great people, I met a lot of other vendors. Some people actually gave me free artwork. I sold a couple.
Cool.
There was a drum circle, there was a lot going on at once. And being that Kelly Green knows autistic people, she set up a safe area. But luckily I didn't need to use it because I was too busy engaging with people. And that's another word that makes me go, eh. Does anyone else have any questions?
Okay, thank you so much, Andy.
Yes.